When I say the Netherlands, you probably think of canals, windmills, tulips, bicycles, and its beautiful capital city, Amsterdam. But did you know that one of the most unique qualities about the Netherlands is that more than a quarter of the Dutch population lives on land below sea level? And no, it's not like Venice, where people practically live on the water. These lands actually look like this. This is the Netherlands in the 13th century, and this is how it would have looked today without some incredible problem solving and engineering. Many of the country's major cities were supposed to be underwater, but rather than surrendering their land to the sea, the Dutch used this doomsday scenario as an opportunity to house their growing population, skyrocket their economy, and ultimately save their country from economic despair. In accordance with the popular Dutch saying, "God created the earth, but the Dutch created the Netherlands," not only did they prevent the sinking of their land, but they recovered property that had been submerged for several millennia. But how did they do this? This is the story of how the Netherlands conquered their land from the sea and ultimately how it saved them. War against the water. The Netherlands' geography has always been great, maybe one of the best in the world, as its strategic location gives it access to several major European markets. Many European rivers, like the Rhine and the Meuse, empty into the ocean via the Netherlands. The land is arable and fertile, as it has always been. However, its geography has also given it a historic enemy. And no, it's not the neighboring France or Germany, it's the water. All these rivers and the rising sea levels have always posed risks for floods and the heavy damages that can accompany them. Take the St. Felix flood, for example. The flood in 1530 that killed over 100,000 people. Enmity with water isn't limited to the Netherlands. Rising sea levels and massive floods also threaten many other nations. For example, the Maldives might be entirely submerged underwater by the end of this century. Or Indonesia, where 4.2 million people were displaced by floods from 2008 to 2021. But what's special about the Dutch is that they fight back and don't let the ocean take their lands for nothing. To understand, let's rewind and examine some historical examples. Although land reclamation started in the 13th century, we'll only rewind to the 16th century, as that is when several major initiatives started. In 1530, water declared war against the Dutch with the St. Felix flood, which we discussed earlier. So, in 1533, the Dutch responded by reclaiming the land under a lake by draining out all its content. They cleared the Achtermeer Lake that used to be here. After that, they drained out many other lakes in the same century and even more in the next. How were they doing this? Well, to drain a lake, the Dutch would cut existing streams first and redirect them around the lake. Next, they would dig a ring canal around the lake's perimeter and then build dikes separating the canal and the lake. After building dikes, an outlet for the ring canal was found by digging canals to a receiving water body, a sea that most of the time was a gulf-like water body, Zuiderzee. Okay, so you might have one question. What are dikes? Dikes are walls that separate two water bodies. They're made of peat, clay, and sand to ensure waterproofing. Anyways, after ensuring that no more water enters the lake, they would drain the remaining water using windmills, or should I say wind-powered water pumping mills. This gave the Dutch new lands that were previously hidden underwater, which today are called polders. The Dutch continued draining lakes in the next century, including this lake, Beemster, which was 12 times larger than any other lake drained before. You might wonder if this can have environmental consequences. What if those dikes break? And what if the rising levels in Zuiderzee cause a storm? Yes, that's something that happened in 1610. A storm in Zuiderzee broke through the dikes and completely flooded the nearly dry Beemster Lake. It might have been disappointing at first, but remember, the Dutch created the Netherlands. They started again, this time with 1 meter higher dikes. Eventually, they dried the lake for themselves in 1612. They continued drawing the lakes and increasing the land for themselves. The reclaimed lands not only increased the habitable area, but also provided fertile soil for agriculture and space for urban development. If you search Zuiderzee on Google Maps, you won't find that gulf. Instead, you'll find an IJsselmeer Lake in its place, which, by the way, is a freshwater lake. But wait, how can a freshwater lake be made from a seawater body? And why would they bother with Zuiderzee? I mean, draining lakes gave them an arable land, but the bed under the seawater isn't arable. If you're having these questions, don't worry, we'll discuss that too. But before that, if you enjoy learning about modern economic stories, be sure to subscribe and click on the bell icon. What happened to Zuiderzee? The first proposal to reclaim lands from Zuiderzee was submitted in 1662, but the government wasn't ready for such a large-scale project. However, later in the 19th century, many proposals started to resurface, including one given by this guy, Cornelis Lely, an engineer and politician. His plan looked something like this. His plan suggested constructing 4 large polders connected to the mainland and islands in Zuiderzee, but before that, they'll turn Zuiderzee into a freshwater lake. His 32-year-old plan was approved 27 years after the proposal, but the construction timetable could never be met. War, economic recession, and project changes have kept delaying the work. However, a lot has been achieved since then. This 32-kilometer dike, called Afsluitdijk, or Closure Dike, was created 9 decades ago. This dike protects the Dutch cities around Zuiderzee from rising sea levels. What was left of Zuiderzee south to the dike was then filled with fresh water from the Ijssel River. At the same time, the Dutch kept removing the seawater using windmills. This made the Zuiderzee into a freshwater lake, which we now call Ijsselmeer, named after the river that filled it. The polders were created in the next step, starting with this one, the Noordoostpolder. They built dikes around the region to be made as polders and then drained the water using windmills. The polder was officially completed on September 9, 1942. The polder was initially made part of the Overijssel province. Simultaneously, they started work on the Flevopolder. Its eastern side was completed in 1957 and the southern side in 1968. Eventually, in 1986, Flevoland, which is mainly made up of the Flevopolder and Noordoostpolder, became the youngest and 12th province of the Netherlands. But is this province of any use? Let's find out in the next section. Flevoland. With this, Flevopolder became the Guinness World Record holder for the largest artificial island, and Flevoland became the youngest province of the Netherlands. The Dutch built an entire province from the sea, one spanning over 931 square miles, or 2,412 square kilometers. But was all of this worth it? After all, the sandy soil isn't suitable for any large-scale construction or agriculture. Did the Dutch reclaim their lands for nothing? The answer is no. While sandy soil doesn't support most of the crops, one specific flower loves this kind of soil, the tulip. Have you ever wondered why the Netherlands is known for tulips? Despite tulips being native to Central Asia, this is the reason. The Dutch started tulip farming on this new land. Today, the Netherlands is the largest tulip producer on the planet. It exports 11 times more than the second largest producer, China. The Netherlands produces 99% of tulips on the planet. That means if they only use their land for more tulip production, the prices will decrease. So what else can they use it for? There's nothing else that can grow on this land, no other crops, so this land is useless unless they convince others to eat grass. Wait, they can't do that. No, they cannot convince other humans, but the cows eat grass, so they can use this new land for dairy farming. That's what they do. They grow grass that feeds cows and then they give us milk. However, the problem with milk is that it expires quickly, and you can't easily export it to other nations, so they turn this milk into cheese. This is where the famous Dutch Gouda cheese comes into the picture. The cheese industry has also benefited the Dutch economy significantly, as the Netherlands is now the second largest exporter of cheese. Flevoland plays a huge role in the production of both these items. Today, the province of Flevoland hosts a population of more than 450,000, slightly less than the US city of Atlanta. Isn't it fascinating to say that almost 500,000 people call this place a home? A place that didn't exist a few generations ago. Considering that Flevoland is surrounded by water, it's also an ideal destination for the fish market. Flevoland also hosts Europe's largest flat fish market, with an annual turnover of over 110 million euros. As time passes, the land is becoming more and more feasible for farming other crops. More and more research institutions are being created in the province to study future prospects. As of 2022, Flevoland had a GDP of 17.3 billion euros. This number might be a little low for the Netherlands, considering that the country's GDP is slightly above the $1 trillion mark. Nevertheless, it's still more than the national GDP of Albania, Jamaica, and Mongolia. The Netherlands did something that was once unthinkable. Today, in many parts of the world, other major cities are at risk of being submerged underwater. Can they learn from the Netherlands and tackle the rising sea levels to protect their lands? Or if not, create more? We hope that they can, just like we hope that you liked today's video and learned something from it. Before we end this video, let us know your thoughts. Do you think the Dutch war against the oceans is something we can all learn from? Or do you think we shouldn't mess with nature and take a more preventative approach to the rising sea levels? If you stayed with us till the end, drop any emoji other than the ocean emoji. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to stay tuned.